He's one of our angels as well, and all that beautiful music. Sweet, sweet surrender. This morning I want to say welcome to Interfaith Spiritual Center Worldwide. We know that nothing happens by chance, that each and every one of us, we are here by divine appointment. So I would say to our viewing audience as well that if you tuned in at this moment, this is the moment for you. And as we come together, our whole theme, I just love. It's blessings of divine grace. And we embody this divine grace by virtue of the fact that we were born, that we have a destiny to fulfill, that we are unfolding that destiny moment by moment by moment. So as we look at the power of surrender, and it's an interesting word, isn't it? Because people get it confused with, giving up. But the truth is, what are we giving up? We're giving up our judgments. We're giving up on looking on the outside for our answers. We're giving up on those things that no longer work for us. So when we open to the divine spirit and realize truly that there is a power for good in the universe, it is moving through us as we allow ourselves to get the ego out of the way, get our judgments, get looking outside of ourselves, to release that and to know that this moment is the only moment there is. This is the eternal moment. The Course in Miracles calls it the holy instant. When we recognize that there is only this moment to surrender, to let go and let God do what God does best by means of each and every one of us. And the whole surrendering process is surrendering to a power greater than we are and allowing it to move through us. And as we allow it to move through us, something miraculous takes place. Because everything that we've been looking for and that we've been striving for and the goals that we've set up for ourselves seem to magically fall into place because we have taken the projection of ourselves off of it. One of my favorite stories, and I shared it last year at Madonna University in Africa, where I will be next week, and it was about a boy named Bruce, and he was working his way through school. So he was a salesman, and he was knocking on doors, and he was, selling his wares. Remember the Fuller Brush Man? Some of us do. That kind of thing. And he was just like, he didn't have any money, and it was hot, and it was in the South. And he just thought, oh, I am so thirsty, and I am so hungry. The next house, I knocked on that door. He said, I'm going to just ask if maybe I can work for a little bit and get some lunch or something. And so he knocked on the next door, and this most beautiful young girl answered the door. He was so taken aback by her beauty and suddenly shy. He said, may I have a glass of water? And she said, oh, just a moment, come in. And so she went into the kitchen. This is many, many years ago. And she brought out a glass of milk. And she said, have this. And he said it was the most delicious glass of milk he had ever tasted. And then he said, well, may I work or may I pay you? And she said, oh, no, my mother taught me that we never charge for charity, or we never charge for a gift that we give. No. And that moment gave him the courage to go on and knock on other doors, working himself through school. And then years and years passed, and this young girl found that she had a heart condition, and she needed to go into the hospital, and she was very, very anxious about it. And she went in, and she was checked, and her papers went into the main doctor, who was chief of staff, Dr. Bruce Keating, the young man who knocked on doors to put himself through school and med school. And he noticed her name, because he had asked all those years before what her name was. And he went in and he peered at her when she was asleep, and he could see that it was still the young girl that had, 20 years before shown him kindness, the milk of human kindness. And he was so surrendered in, the next door that I knock on. And then so overcome by her beauty that he just asked for a glass of water and received the milk of human kindness. He was the chief of staff. He was the head surgeon. He performed that surgery. And afterwards, she was very, very anxious about the bill and had very limited funds and insurance. And when they gave her the envelope and she opened it, it said, paid in full through the milk of human kindness. 1 glass of milk. Now, this is a true story, that he carried that with him, that he had to surrender to being hungry and thirsty in the South and working himself through school, and thought, the next door I knock on. And what happens with us is some of us, we feel like the next door we knock on, we're going to get the same result as we've gotten. So, symbolically, what doors are we knocking on? And are we creating a space in our lives to receive that energy, whether we call it the milk of human kindness, to really let go and let God do what God does best? Jesus said, resist not. And what that means, and he also said, agree with thine adversary quickly. And we think, what? Agree with mine adversary quickly? They're in the wrong and I'm right. I've never been so right. What does he mean? Agree with thine adversary quickly. Resist not. But you see, Jesus, who became the Christ, was the greatest psychologist on the planet. He knew that if we resist, we're going to get the same result we've always gotten and keep resisting and resisting. But he said, resist not. Agree with thine adversary quickly. So what that means in the turning of the other cheek is turning the other way. Away from this negativity. Away from this energy field. So when we agree with thine adversary quickly, he just meant surrender trying to be right. The Course in Miracles states, would you rather be right or happy? And most of us say both. I want to be right and happy. I'm just so right. But the truth is, we can surrender that. We know we're right, but we can agree to disagree. And not everyone's going to see it in the way that we see it. So when we look at our way of life, the science, this is the great science of mind philosophy, that there is a probable psychological cause in mind for everything that we experience. Not to beat ourselves up with, but to learn and to grow and to unfold and say, oh, so that's where that came from. I just love the writings of Alan Cohen. He wrote a book called The Dragon Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And he writes many, many wonderful things. And he wrote a book called Looking In for number one. Looking in for not looking out for number one. Looking in for number one. Going within to the secret place of the Most High. To pray to our Father, Mother, God in secret, and to know that we are acknowledged openly by the outward demonstrations of our lives. In other words, what's showing up? Is it getting our attention? So when we look in for number one, we are going within. And he was telling a story that he was giving a seminar at retreat grounds. And he said it was really interesting. They're very beautiful grounds. And he said that at lunchtime, one of the students got up and began massaging his shoulders. And if you've had anyone do that, when you're just sitting there, it's just like, oh, you're in heaven. And she massaged his neck, and he goes, oh, he could just feel any tension that he was feeling, just release from him. It just was so wonderful. And he said he closed his eyes, and he really got into it. And then he heard this voice say, no healing allowed. He thought someone's playing a practical joke. He opened his eyes. And there was Ranger Bob, with his little hat. And he said, crew cut and gun in the holster. And, was the security officer. And they all said, at first they were aghast and burst out laughing. They thought it was so hysterical. But realized he really meant business. No healing allowed. And so she took her hands off his shoulders and sat down. And he said, oh, I'm going to go catch a little nap between sessions. And so after lunch he said, who should be in the hallway to greet me but Ranger Bob. And he said, I thought I'm going to have fun with this. And he goes, wow, you got there just in the nick of time. Boy, that healing, the healing had begun. And we were really, in the wrong doing that. And he goes, that's right. He said, if everybody got up and started doing healings, we'd have healings all over the place. That's supposed to be done in the temple only. And he said, this man is really serious. And he said he's keeping a straight face. I mean, this is like hysterical. I mean, no healings allowed, excuse me. And what was so amazing, he said, I just sort of surrendered the whole thing, got into my room, burst out laughing, laughed and laughed and laughed, and then thought, what is in this for me? And he said, sometimes I get so caught up in the details that I forget about the essence of why I'm there. I'm so caught up in doing all this out here that I forget that I'm there by divine right action and consciousness. That I'm there to allow God to do what God does best and flow through me. So we all get so caught up in the details of life, we forget why we're here. And suddenly, no healing allowed, because we're so caught up in the way it should be that we forget the deeper spiritual purpose of why we are here. And he said, suddenly Ranger Bob was my angel. He was a gift in Ranger's clothing. It was just amazing, and he was so typical. But he was my angel that day. And I thought about how the universe always is in agreement with us. And that I went to the doctor with my mother and went to her oncologist. And the oncologist said, it's a very, dim view. And he said, that isn't my reality at all. And I said, well, is there anything you can do for my mother? And he said, well, I'm not the master of biology. I thought, I don't want you to be the master of biology. I want you to be the master of your soul. We're into the soul here. And then he remembered that his mother had told him a few months before she was ready to go that she was so proud of him and that she had done everything that she wanted to accomplish this lifetime. So it's okay to go and to be with your father. And he said he understood that she created the doctor that would tell her what she wanted to hear on the subconscious level. And when he remembered that, he let it go. And in a few months, she passed. And he remembered that. He remembered energetically that as he surrendered and respected her wishes and didn't jump in. I mean, I cannot tell you, when my mother had her stroke, I jumped in and it's occupational therapy today, it's exercise today, it's this today, it's that today. And my mother just said, can I just sit here? I wanted her to get up and be as she was before the stroke. Those were my wishes. They weren't her wishes. And I kept my mother going for 9 years. I really did. I sat when she was in unconscious coma for 3 weeks and they wanted to unplug her. I said, we have unfinished business to do, and you are not unplugging that machine until we handle it. I was so unsurrendered about it. And when my mother opened her eyes, she said, oh, hi, honey. Oh, I was visiting your sister and my brother. And, she'd gone on this trip in the etheric. And finally, I got it one day. I said, you can have anything you want to eat. If you don't want to exercise today, fine. I just felt like I wanted our relationship to be healed and that I was not, I didn't have to be her little sergeant, getting her well, in quotes, what I considered well. She wanted to be where she was. So when we recognize and respect another's wishes and surrender and let go and let God do what God does best, we're allowing the love to come in as well. So when we surrender, we're surrendering to a higher power. We're surrendering over this situation here that we can't do a damn thing about. It's just there. And as we back up and let go and realize there is a power for good in the universe greater than I am, and I can use it, and I'm tapping into it right here and right now. And I may need the Ranger Bobs in my life, and I may need, that knock on the door to realize the milk of human kindness, and that it's here with us today. And that as we surrender, as we let go, the miracle arises. The energy, phoenix-like from the ashes, arises, triumphant and victorious. And we have done our perfect work, accepting what is and letting go and letting that energy arise. This is why I love our way of life. It's a cause and effect relationship. It doesn't let us off the hook, but it's a warm and loving presence. It says, I love you. You are my beloved son in whom I am well pleased. You are my beloved daughter in whom I am well pleased. I love you. We feel that love, those moments of at-one-ment. And it's a mechanical law. And if we're using the law of cause and effect in a negative way, those results come back. They knock on our door, and we open to them because we're ready for that lesson. We think we're not. I didn't ask for this. Yes, you did. You just didn't know you were asking for it. You know, it's so interesting. It's here. Let's embrace it. Let's acknowledge it. Let's know today that we are the two or three gathered together, that we are happy, healthy, prosperous, and free, that there is that power here in the midst of us, that when we hear that knock on the door opens from within, and we open to the milk of human kindness. We resist not. We agree with our adversary quickly, and that means we turn away from the negativity to the truth of our being and realizing this day in whom we live and move and have our being. I am so grateful to be with you here today. I am so grateful for my spiritual community. I am an ordained minister. People say, well, you should be all over the world doing what you're doing. I said, and I am. But I am an ordained minister, and I am at the bedsides. I deal more intimately with the human condition than any other profession. And I'm there listening to suffering, and I'm listening to joys. I'm there at christenings and weddings and memorials. And what I know is that people leave feeling better than they arrive, because this is the perspective of life. This is that life going before us and preparing the way. And I am so grateful. Remember that gratitude is the doorway to miracles. And you're going to hear that on Thanksgiving Eve by our beloved Kay Schreiber. Gratitude is the doorway to miracles. When we are grateful, when we open and say, thank you, Father, Mother, God, for the abundance that is mine, for this amazing experience of life, more life opens up for us. More energy opens up for us so that we don't get stuck on how we think it should be. But we can surrender to the process and let go and let God do what God does best by means of each and every one of us who heard the call and answered. And when we answer, we take a stand, don't we? We take a stand in the truth. Know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Because we are going where? We are going higher yet. Where are we going? Higher yet. Where are we going? Higher yet. And so it is. God bless you. I love you. And it's just a joy to be with you.